Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. My name is Paul, the Canadian Snowman, here with some more awesome history. Today we're doing Battle of Hong Kong, 1941, part of the Pacific War, World War II stuff. Yeah, we just did the Crusades, so definitely check that out. If you haven't, that's just pretty cool, interesting stuff. And now I'm doing probably a few solo ones or two-parters, before I get into like another long series. And I want to jump to I guess different time periods or in like different places in the world. Kind of why I do this, So this one's been actually requested for a long time. Well, at least the last couple months anyway. But so why not do it now? Battle of Hong Kong, 1941. Obviously World War II stuff. I don't know Battle of Hong Kong. I don't know anything about, and obviously I know World War II, and I know everyone knows a lot about World War II, but pretty much like when you're thinking about World War II, you think of Hitler and Europe, or you think of Pearl Harbor and America versus Japan stuff, but you don't really think about countries like China. Like Hong Kong. Is Hong Kong its own country? I might be thinking of a different country. I mean a different city. Isn't Hong Kong like it's part of China, but it's kind of has its own rules, at least for like the next like 40 years or something like that. Like it's some kind of crazy rule with like England. They have like freedom of speech and stuff like that in Hong Kong, but yet the rest of China doesn't. Uh, it's something like I seen some kind of video like that. I'm not sure if it's Hong Kong or if it's a different city. But anyways, this I'm pretty sure it has nothing to do with this video here. Uh, but anyways, this just came to mind. Oh, I was actually gonna do this. What was it called? Like, what was I? Tom, what was it? Was it? I don't forget what his name. Like Thomas, the sea captain, craziest sea captain or something. But then it was like I pulled a video up. It was like an hour. It was like an hour and 17 minutes or something. Like, I'm sorry, guys. I'm not. Maybe one day, But right now, I'm not sitting through an hour and 17-minute video because knowing myself, the hour and 17-minute video is going to be 2 hours. So I'm going to end up stopping it every 2 seconds, like I do. Seems like, and I want to because that sounds really interesting. If I do it, I'll probably make it like into three or four parter, and just like watch like about 20 minutes of it, and pause it, and then continue from that point in another video. But yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that because it's really interesting. And but anyways, guys, we're doing Battle of Hong Kong, 1941. This was actually a suggestion because I have a single in the community tab. There's a spot where you can request like one or two part videos, and then I have a separate one for bigger series, and this is one of the ones that was in that suggestion. It's just so much easier to go to one spot instead of trying to scroll through a whole bunch of comments to find suggestions. But anyways, guys, yeah, we're gonna jump into this Battle of Hong Kong. What countries are involved here? Obviously China. Wasn't Japan at war with China? So I'm pretty sure Japan was at war with China. Or was China at war with Russia? I don't know. We're gonna get into it, guys, because I've talked long enough. Talked long enough, guys. Before we do, please hit that like and subscribe button below. We do a lot of history stuff here, guys, a lot of geography. So if you're new here, you should definitely check out like the playlist and stuff, because we always have a lot of cool. The community is really cool. I really appreciate the people who watch my stuff because they're really nice and informative. So I'm sure I'll get some help on this video too, because I don't know much about it. But anyways, guys, like, subscribe in 3, 2, 1, bam. Kings and Generals, awesome channel. Check it out.
For more than 100 years, the colony of Hong Kong had been under the administration of the British Empire, rapidly developing into a major entrepot of the region. Amidst the Second World War, Tensions between the Empire of Japan and the Allied nations were escalating, as Japan was trying to make its foothold in the Pacific bigger than ever before.
Yeah, because British was in control of it, and then there was some they gave it back to China, but there was some kind of rule where like China really couldn't take control till like 1950 or something like that. That's like I seen some kind of little documentary on that, but that's now like Britain's. I thought that was after the World War. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know anything.
Escalating, as Japan was trying to make its foothold in the Pacific bigger than ever before. These tensions finally led to the Japanese Empire's simultaneous attack on Allied bases across the theatre in December of 1941. In this video, we will cover one of these attacks, the Battle of Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Among our New Year's resolutions for 2021 is reading more books, and the sponsor of 15-minute listen title is China's and generals are going to get When the British signed the Anglo-Japanese alliance in 1902, they were not expecting that Japan would rise to dominance in the Far East. Rather, they were concerned about the expansion of the Russian Empire in the region. But after the Russo-Japanese War and the annexation of Korea, the Empire of Japan became a powerhouse and started to dream about a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, essentially threatening the rule of Western powers in the Far East. In 1923, the Anglo-Japanese alliance was terminated, leaving behind a feeling of distrust between the British Commonwealth and the Empire of Japan. By 1936, the Japanese had expanded into Manchuria and Inner Mongolia, causing great concern in the British colonies. As Japan invaded China and managed to conquer Beijing, Nanjing and Shanghai, the colonies started preparing for war. In October 1938, Japanese troops landed at Bias Bay, just 24 kilometers northeast of Hong Kong.
I just want to say this, like I think I've said this in like a couple other videos, but first of all, wow, I think I said it. Anyways, where like countries they invade and they get so much land, like Japan gets all this land, and I always think like if I feel like countries get greedy and they just want to take over everything when they could have just like got a big portion of land and stop right there, and kind of like made a truce, and then basically you have a lot more land than you normally would have, but yet they keep going and going until they can't, until it's too much land, and then they lose the war and they gain everything they had gained. They lose everything they had gained, and they're back to where they started from. But everyone seems to go for more, and then they get pushed back. Anyways, Japan kicked a butt. I forgot how powerful they were. I knew they took over some land, from like over there on the coast, but wow.
Japanese troops landed at Bias Bay, just 24 kilometers northeast of Hong Kong, and captured the cities of Guangzhou and Wuhan. Despite these losses, the Chinese refused to surrender and continued to resist while building up the means to sustain the war effort. During this time, much of the aid that China received from the Allied nations arrived by sea, with Hong Kong being their most important port. By 1940, around 40% of the vital supplies received by the Chinese came through Hong Kong, as most of the Chinese ports had already been occupied by Japan. Thus, for Japan's war strategy, it was critical to cut off China's supply through the British colony. Furthermore, economic sanctions and embargoes by the Allies and the United States increased tensions between the two parties, finally forcing the Japanese Empire to follow a path down to war. As the border conflicts at the Shenzhen River intensified, and thousands of refugees fled into the British colony, the Hong Kong government announced the evacuation of European women and children and started to improve its defences for an unavoidable attack. As for its garrison, they had Major General Christopher Maltby with 2 British and 2 Indian regular army battalions, supported by 1 local Chinese regiment, and 5 infantry companies from the Hong Kong Volunteer Defence Corps. These forces, however, lacked experienced officers and were reduced to a symbolic size, as the British government didn't think that Hong Kong could be successfully defended. Instead, it could only be held for some little time to delay the Japanese advance. In late 1941, Maltby was also reinforced by 2 Canadian battalions, dubbed as the Sea Force, thus helping to boost the morale of the defenders and bringing their total strength to 14,000 soldiers.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the Japanese invading force of the 23rd Army.
I'm Canadian, and I never even knew that we had troops over there, so that's pretty interesting.
Meanwhile, the Japanese invading force of the 23rd Army was composed of the 28th Infantry Division with approximately 20,000 men, the 2nd China Fleet with the Isuzu light cruiser as its flagship, and the 1st Air Brigade, mainly composed of the Kawasaki Ki-32 light bombers. The leading commanders of this operation, General Sakai Takeshi and Major General Kuribayashi Tadamichi, planned to capture Hong Kong within 10 days by conducting a naval blockade and bombardment, along with a series of airstrikes on key installations, with a final 3-pronged land invasion led by the 228th, 229th and 230th Regiments of the 38th Division.
Okay.
According to the plan, to the west, the 230th would make a large hook curving right to clear the Castle Peak Road and to strike at the vital point around the left flank of the Gin Drinkers Line. To the east, the 229th would cross the tidal cove at the Tolo Harbour, heading towards the Kai Tak Airport and the Devil's Peak, a major battery position, while in the centre, the 228th would strike directly at the Gin Drinkers Line. The aim of the plan was to destroy the British forces on the mainland, while forcing Hong Kong to surrender with an intense bombardment. If the British continued to resist, however, then the island would have to be invaded as well. To cover this invasion force, Sakai also placed the 66th Regiment at the town of Danshui to protect the rear against the Chinese and to secure the conquered zones at Kowloon and the New Territories. On December 1st, the Japanese plan was approved, and the 23rd Army started to mobilize to prepare for the offensive operation. 5 days later, some Imperial troops had already landed at Meuse Bay, and the bulk of the invading force had managed to reach Buji Town near the Shenzhen River. Early on the morning of December 8th, the Japanese invasion began with an air bombardment over the Kai Tak Airport, effectively destroying most of the British aircraft. At the same time, Maltby learned of the disaster at Pearl Harbor and the declaration of war, so he ordered the troops at Kowloon to blow up all bridges and demolition points with the objective of slowing down the Japanese advance. While the men at the Gin Drinkers Line prepared themselves for war, General Sano Tadayoshi's 38th Division crossed the river and commenced its offensive. Around the New Territories, the Japanese
Seems like a bad timing to go after Pearl Harbor, right? I mean, obviously they didn't know what the outcome was, but, obviously they awoke a sleeping giant down there. But, man, I didn't know, this kind of stuff existed, man. And it's like, that just seems like some crazy terrain that, to kind of take over, Hong Kong. It's the formation of everything. I don't know. We're about to get into some deep stuff right now, though.
Crossed the river and commenced its offensive. Around the New Territories, the Japanese suffered a series of ambushes by the Punjabi defenders, yet despite the casualties, the invaders remained relentless in their advance, aided by stolen maps procured by spies on the island. By late afternoon, the Japanese had reached the village of Taipo, and a couple of hours later, the invaders took their enemy by surprise at the town of Shatin, forcing the defenders to retreat to the Gin Drinkers Line. The following day, Vice Admiral Nimi Masaichi, aboard the Isuzu, completed the naval blockade around the island of Hong Kong, although 2 British destroyers managed to escape the encirclement. At midday, Colonel Doi of the 228th was at Needle Hill doing reconnaissance when he detected a weak spot on the Gin Drinkers Line, exactly at the Xingmen Redoubt. Despite the foggy weather and the fact that the redoubt was outside his regimental boundary, The Japanese officer didn't want to waste this great opportunity to break through the British defences, so he ordered his men to prepare for an assault. On Xingmen, an inexperienced and undermanned company of the Royal Scots controlled 5 reinforced pillboxes connected by underground tunnels. In total, around 40 defenders were going to face off against 1,500 Japanese troops.
Dang.
Undetected, a 150-strong vanguard managed to reach 2 of the pillboxes by afternoon and prepared to attack at night. With grenades and gunfire, these first 2 pillboxes fell, albeit with some casualties for the Japanese. A counterattack by the Royal Scots was also repelled, and the defenders soon found themselves trapped at the redoubt.
Damn.
For some 3 hours, the invaders were held at bay by the Royal Scots and some Rajput reinforcements. Yet by December 10th, the remaining pillboxes were blown up with explosives and the redoubt surrendered.
Man, good job to the Scots in that, because like 40 people against like 1,000. Man, good job just for holding them back that long, man. That had to be some intense fighting, and they were scared, man. I mean, outnumbered, but man, they did a good job, man. They did their business.
Remaining pillboxes were blown up with explosives, and the redoubt surrendered. This was catastrophic for the British, but it was also an unpleasant surprise for the Japanese command, as it wasn't part of the plan they had devised. After being reprimanded for insubordination, Colonel Doi started to reinforce the newly gained positions with the objective of defending themselves from the incoming British counterattacks. Meanwhile, the 230th advanced against Golden Hill, where another company of the Royal Scots was stationed. This time, however, the British managed to hold their ground with the help of Rajput reinforcement and the support of the gunboat HMS Sikala. At the same time, the 229th started to cross Tide Cove after being held up by delaying actions. The next day started with a naval invasion on Lama Island, heading to cross the straits into Aberdeen Island and thus threatening the British position at Hong Kong. This attack was eventually driven off by long-range artillery from the Winnipeg Grenadiers, but it succeeded in diverting the efforts of the defenders, as Maltby kept the Canadian battalions on Hong Kong Island and allowed the Japanese to consolidate their position on Xingmen. With the gin drinkers line breached and the threat of an attempted naval invasion, Maltby had no other choice but to order the evacuation of the mainland forces under the cover of darkness.
Yeah.
To the east, however, the Rajputs and their supporting artillery were to withdraw to the Mayao Tong line, which protected the Devil's Peak Peninsula, as Maltby thought that it could be defended and supplied from the Learmonth Strait. Yet on the night of December 12th, the Rajputs saw their position untenable and finally decided to retreat to Hong Kong Island through the straits.
Damn.
Moreover, the Japanese had already reached the southern tip of the Kowloon Peninsula and the mainland.
They're outnumbered, man. There's so many Japanese, and Hong Kong is basically, they're getting attacked by all 4 sides. I mean, if you're outnumbered, you kind of have to condense down your troops, right, and do what you can do. But it's kind of crazy how they came from. There's so many angles they're coming from. And I just want to say, just the graphics. This is totally new, because I've never seen this from Kings and Generals before, the boats and stuff. But then again, this is a new time period. This is all very modern when it comes to war. But it's definitely interesting. Is this a game, or is this just a program? Because that's really cool. Anyway, let's get back to this, man. See how they defend Hong Kong here, if they defend it.
The Japanese had already reached the southern tip of the Kowloon Peninsula, and the mainland was entirely in their grasp. By the morning of December 13th, the evacuation had been completed, and the defenders were already taking up their new positions on the island of Hong Kong. The defense of the mainland had lasted for only 5 days, but now the British were going to face the true aim of the Japanese invasion. As the colonial government refused to surrender the island, in the afternoon the Japanese began a heavy bombardment that caused incalculable damage and even caused some defenders to desert. Spies in Hong Kong were also working day and night to destabilize the island and encourage more desertions among the Chinese population. At night on December 15th, the first Japanese assault was launched after some preparatory bombardment. The invaders, however, would be repelled by machine gun fire as they attempted to cross the harbour in improvised rafts. Despite this setback, by December 17th, the Japanese were prepared to launch their main assault on the island. Many boats had already been rounded up in preparation for the crossing. Half of the pillboxes between North Point and the Liamen Straits had been destroyed, and an explosion of oil storage tanks gave perfect cover for the Japanese with a pall of dense black smoke over the area. The following day, the increase in air bombardment and the amassing of small craft at Kowloon pointed out that the Japanese assault was going to happen that very night. Their plan consisted of a two-pronged naval invasion, with the 230th and 228th embarking from the Kai Tak airport towards the Taiku docks, and with the 229th stepping off from the Devil's Hill area and crossing the Liamen Straits into Saiwan. At night, the crossing commenced, with the silent embarking of the 228th heading towards the Taiku docks, while the 230th travelled to the vicinity of North Point. The Japanese were able to get halfway undetected, and after 1 hour they disembarked at their destination. Not long after, the 229th arrived at Saiwan and then at Aldrich Bay, completing the...
Dang, that seemed like really easy. They took that, but I mean, it was a really good plan they had, with the smoke, and all, and like the bombings along the coast. So I get, it gives me more, I guess, respect to the Japanese, I guess, army, because just from when I think of Japanese, war in World War II, I just think Pearl Harbor, and then United States basically, pushing them back, and then you have the atomic bombs, and then that's it. I don't really think about the stuff going on. I guess what the Pacific War here, like stuff like in Hong Kong. But man, like Japanese were formidable opponents apparently. So wow, it's definitely like more eye opening to me, just to see this stuff.
The successful landing of the Japanese forces by midnight. The Japanese were met by the Rajput defenders, who offered fierce resistance and inflicted many casualties on the Japanese. But the invaders were vastly superior in numbers, and in consequence, the Rajputs lost most of their officers and their resistance crumbled. Maltby, meanwhile, underestimated the size of the Japanese invasion and believed that the main invasion force was going to come directly at Victoria, so he decided against any counterattack and instead formed a new defensive line at Leighton Hill, composed of a platoon of the Middlesex and the Rajput remnants.
Wow, so they thought everyone was going to come here to Victoria. Didn't want to back up these guys. This guy, like, look at this. These are the only ones over here. This guy's going to get like swallowed, and you're going to have a giant force flanking them. Oh my God, this does not look good, for the British and Canadians, all that stuff.
Simultaneously, the 230th broke through the Rajput defenders, only to find themselves stopped by a platoon of volunteer defence corps, the Fusiliers, holed up in the North Point power station. Around 80 men, led by Major General Johnston Patterson, the chairman of the company Jardine Matheson, managed to hold down the entire Japanese regiment by themselves.
Wow.
Unable to dislodge the Fusiliers, the Japanese decided to bombard the power station into submission. For an hour, the Fusiliers resisted, inflicting several casualties on their enemy, but in the end, their ammunition was exhausted and they had to surrender.
Damn.
Some men, however, escaped using a broken bus as cover,
and they surrendered. I don't know. Like, I know there's the rules of war and stuff like that, but I know like some countries are different. Like, because I didn't think that did Japanese take prisoners? Because I never really hear about that. So like when Japanese takes prisoners, is it like any other country taking prisoners? They put them in a camp like that, or It's like more maybe more ruthless, like they just kill them. So I never really think about, never really heard about Japanese, like I guess POW camps, you know. So kind of, but I guess that's the thing. I just haven't heard about it, you know. Anyways, there'd have to be POW camps. Because why would you surrender if you knew you were gonna die? You know, because they probably would have knew that.
Some men, however, escaped using a broken bus as cover and continued to offer strong resistance for 18 more hours, which enabled Maltby to better assess the situation and establish a new front line to the west. At the same time, the 229th at Aldrich Bay took the Leman fort and savagely executed its garrison. Then they encountered a platoon of the Royal Rifles of Canada and successfully managed to repel their counterattack into the fort.
Damn.
Proceeding southwards, the 229th came upon a camp of the Silesian missions.
So they executed him earlier. I guess does that kind of answer my question? Damn.
Southwards, the 229th came upon a camp of the Silesian missions, and there they were ordered to massacre all of the medical personnel. Concurrently, the Canadians retreated to Mount Parker, where they managed to stop the invaders' advance, with both sides suffering heavy losses.
Good job,
Unable
boys.
to dislodge the Canadians, the Japanese flanked their position and continued in a southwestern direction, while the Canadians themselves had to withdraw further south due to their losses. But the most important operation of December 19th would happen in the center of the island. At the Wangnechong Gap, the British had placed the headquarters of their defense of Hong Kong, controlling the route from north to south and from west to east. Thus, as the Japanese approached this key valley, 3 platoons of the Winnipeg Grenadiers were dispatched to block the Japanese advance at Jardine's Lookout. After a fierce struggle, the defenders would be pushed back to some pillboxes around the area, while the 230th moved to occupy the lookout. Suffering heavy casualties, the Japanese overwhelmed the pillboxes and then continued into the gap. In response, the Winnipeg Grenadiers launched a counterattack and managed to retake Mount Butler.
Nice.
For 15 hours, they would defend this position against the full might of the 228th Regiment before surrendering the height and retreating westwards. Meanwhile,
I know. I usually, like I said, I usually don't pick, you know, like in movies you dealt with, like, you know, Rome and like Crusades and stuff. I don't pick, like, I didn't really pick it. I don't have to pick a side, you know. I just kind of like went with it. But this, when it comes to like the modern history, like you guys know how it is. If your country is involved, you root for your country. So, you know, I know Canadians are involved, kind of root for them, you know. You know, usually when it comes to recent history, usually, you know, you root for the Allies, you know, like the British and stuff like that. But like when it comes to like Asian stuff, I pretty much go with root for, like if we're following Hannibal or Caesar, kind of root for them, you know, in the battles and stuff like that. But like, you know, if we're not following a certain person, I just really enjoy, like, I guess the back and forth and, you know, each side doing their thing. And right now, you kind of just like respect the power of the Japanese. And while my Canadians, you know, the Brits are outnumbered, but you know they're holding on strong, man. They're taking some people down with them.
regiment before surrendering the height and retreating westwards. Meanwhile, the 230th surrounded Wangnechong and captured several key positions around it, causing great concern for the British defenders.
Dang.
Desperate, they attempted to escape by midday, but were cut down by machine gun fire across the gap,
Damn.
resulting in the fall of the center of the island. When Maltby learned about this, he prepared his forces for a massive counterattack, aimed at retaking Wangnechong and Jardine's Lookout, yet the operation was very badly planned and executed. As the Royal Scots arrived late to support the offensive, the Winnipeg Grenadiers attacked alone against the gap, while the Scots at Mount Nicholson were directed to assault Jardine's Lookout. Both forces incredibly succeeded in getting close to their objectives in the face of a superior foe, but in the end, they were met with machine gun fire and had to retreat. By the morning of December 20th, the Japanese had consolidated their control over the center of the island and were sweeping away the last remnants of the British defenders. The Battle of Wongnechon Gap would be essential for the fall of the British colony, but it would also be a costly operation for the Japanese, as they lost almost 800 men in the offensive. For the next few days, the
Wow.
Japanese would continue their advance across the island, while Maltby struggled to
You know, I know that there doesn't seem like that many men, but like you should remember they had like a thousand, or I remember a couple thousand like going ashore when the British only had like 40 people. Remember when we were on the other side of the water, so the Japanese casualties are a lot higher than like basically Allies casualties, and they need their men because and Japanese are on other fronts too, and so damn, it looks like it's just they're just kind of like they're all on one side of the island, just trying. Japanese are just trying to push their way across here. It's just crazy. It's like you were used to like the giant numbers when you do those who have been following it from Rome and the Crusades and stuff, where you're talking about thousands and thousands of casualties. But think about it. This is just a very small area here, very small. I guess more in modern warfare, you didn't need thousands of men like marching side by side. Obviously you got guns and stuff like that. It's a very different kind of war.
reorganize his depleted their advance across the island, while Maltby struggled to reorganize his depleted and dispersed forces. After reaching Violet Hill, elements of the 228th and 229th stumbled upon the Repulse Bay Hotel, reinforced with men from the Royal Rifles of Canada, and were held down there in a 3-day siege. At the same time, the 228th moved to Choson Hill, just north of Deepwater Bay, and defeated a company of the Punjabis before moving to Brick Hill, where they captured elements of the Middlesex and then beheaded them in cold blood.
What?
In the west, Mount Nicholson fell into Japanese hands by December 21st, and the 230th prepared to attack the new defensive line at Mount Cameron. The following day, the attack commenced, with the Punjabi defenders south of Leighton Hill being decimated and opening up a gap in the British line. Luckily, Rajput reinforcements coming from the north managed to hold down the invaders, while men from the Middlesex reinforced the gap to stop the Japanese advance. Simultaneously, elements of the 229th and 230th launched an attack on Stanley Mound, defended by the Royal Rifles of Canada. The Canadians repulsed the Japanese attack several times, but after their ammunition started to run low, they had to retreat further south. On December 23rd, the 228th coming from the south broke through Mount Cameron and left Leighton Hill exposed to heavy bombardment. Although the Rajput defenders managed to fall back, the Middlesex regiment was infiltrated and annihilated. With the fall of the hill, the main water supply of Victoria City was cut off, and without water, it was a matter of time before the British capitulated. On Christmas Eve, the situation looked impossible for Maltby. The Canadians were preparing a last stand at the Stanley Peninsula, and the Japanese were at the gates of the colonial capital. That same day saw the fall of St. Stephen's College and the breach of the Canadian defensive line, causing everyone in the temporary hospital to be sadistically massacred and raped. On Christmas morning, the Canadians regrouped and launched a counterattack against Stanley Village, inflicting heavy.
You know what? Yeah, even though the Canadians and British they're outnumbered, they were like fighting. They were giving every last bit because they knew there is no surrender. You fall back, they get a hold of you, you're dead. You're being crucified or whatever. And Japanese taking no prisoners. I guess I pretty much answered my own question that kind of had earlier on in this video. But damn, dude, I mean that'd be scary, dude. You're out totally surrounded, outnumbered, and there's nowhere to go. It's like you probably have to come to terms with yourself. I've never fought in war or anything, so I don't know. But you probably just, or it's just probably, I don't know if it's just so much going on you don't really even think about it, But man, it had to be scary, man. Knowing that it's basically kill or be killed. There's no other way.
heavy casualties on the Japanese, but in the end they were defeated and had to retreat. At midday, on what is today known to Hong Kongers as the Black Christmas, Maltby and the British authorities saw that further resistance was futile and decided to officially surrender.
Wow.
For the next 3 days, the Japanese troops raped and pillaged while their commanders mounted a victory parade. Despite the quick victory, the Japanese were surprised that the opposition had been much stronger than anticipated, as in total they suffered around 3,000 casualties. The British, meanwhile, suffered around 4,500 losses against an enemy superior in number, with the rest of their forces, some 10,000 men, being captured and left behind in prison camps. The Japanese occupation of Hong Kong lasted for 3.5 years, in which an estimated 10,000 Hong Kongers were executed, while many more were tortured, raped or maimed. The disastrous Japanese administration led to hyperinflation, food rationing, famines, and the starvation of the local population, and is regarded nowadays as the darkest time in Hong Kong's history. We're planning more videos covering modern conflicts, so make sure you're subscribed and have...
Damn. They basically, they just wiped it. It was like a big, like a mini Holocaust right there, man. They just wiped them out, man. It's like any survivors there, were dead, and there's people there that was their homeland. They were just gonna give up on it. Maybe they're hoping for mercy, I guess. But everyone just got wiped out, raped and put. Wow, war is just scary, man. It's like it's a lot of like the darkest things, mankind just come out in war. I know, there's also like bright moments, by heroes and stuff. But damn, that is really harsh. And obviously, I guess because once the United States kind of comes back and you know takes down the Japanese, Hong Kong kind of falls with it. I guess that's kind of how Hong Kong, goes back to China, or goes back to the British. I'm not exactly sure how that dynamic works, but dang, I honestly wasn't expecting that. Wasn't sure what to expect in this kind of video, but it was kind of cool, to see something more modern. I like in a different area of the world. Like, I'm probably going to jump around a bunch of these single videos and do some of that stuff. But I hope you guys enjoy this video. Please hit that like and subscribe. And yeah, I hope you guys stick around. And we're going to be jumping around, doing different time periods and different areas, and try to anyway. I guess I'm not gonna make any promises, but we like to go on adventures here and learn new stuff. So I hope you guys, subscribe and come along for the journey because we have a lot of fun. But anyways, guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Man, Japanese, they had the numbers, they were kicking butt. I mean, it's Canadians and British were trying to hold them back and stuff. It just wasn't meant to be, man. It just got overpowered, and just so sad for the people on that island, man. It doesn't seem like there was any survivors unless you fled, So anyways, peace. Catch you guys in future videos. Always a blast. Thank you. And you guys have a nice day, nice night. I'm out of here.